it's not really Hollywood. I mean, this is a made-in-Australia film. In fact, very few films are made here anymore. You talk about Hollywood. I mean, where is it really? I mean, it's kind of, there's a sign up there on the hill, but it doesn't really exist.
For years, Hollywood watched Mel Gibson dominate screens with Braveheart and Lethal Weapon.
It was like, you're making this film, and the idea was that we're all responsible for this, that his sacrifice was for all mankind, and that for all our ills and all the things in our fallen nature.
Only to see his personal life play out in tabloid headlines, from high-profile divorces to explosive public incidents that made him both idolized and infamous. Now, at 70, Mel Gibson, after nearly a decade of being together and years of speculation surrounding their relationship, has finally confessed the actual reason behind the divorce with Rosalind Ross. This is one roller coaster ride you just can't miss. Previous marriages and splits. Mel Gibson's personal life has always unfolded with the sweep and volatility of the epics he brought to the screen. Long before he became the Oscar-winning director of Braveheart or the wisecracking, unhinged cop in Lethal Weapon, he was a young actor navigating life between New York and Australia, trying to build something lasting away from the cameras. In the late 1970s, as his breakout performance in Mad Max turned him into a rising international star, his off-screen world was taking shape in far quieter rooms. That was when he met Robin Denise Moore in Adelaide. She was working as a dental nurse. He was still, in many ways, an unproven actor with sudden fame arriving faster than stability. They married on June 7th, 1980, in a Catholic ceremony in Forestville, New South Wales. Gibson was 24, Robin was 30. The marriage would last 26 years. This was an eternity by Hollywood standards. Over that time, they built a family of 7 children, daughter Hannah, followed by Edward and Christian, twins, William, Louis, Milo, and Thomas. While Gibson's face became one of the most recognizable in global cinema throughout the 1980s and 1990s, his home life projected something strikingly traditional. But it was not to last. Interviews from that era frequently described him as a devoted Catholic family man, raising his children largely out of the Hollywood spotlight on properties in Malibu and Costa Rica. Professionally, the numbers were staggering. The Lethal Weapon franchise alone spanned 4 films between 1987 and 1998, each grossing hundreds of millions worldwide. Then came 1995. Braveheart not only dominated the box office, but won 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director for Gibson himself at the 68th Academy Awards in 1996. At that moment, he was untouchable, an action star turned respected filmmaker, married nearly 2 decades, father of a large Catholic family, living what appeared to be a meticulously structured life. But stability can fracture quietly before it collapses publicly. The turning point came in the early hours of July 28, 2006, on the Pacific Coast Highway in Malibu, California. Gibson was pulled over by a Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputy for speeding. His blood alcohol level measured 0.12%, above California's legal limit of 0.08%. What might have been a routine celebrity DUI spiraled into something far more explosive when he unleashed a drunken tirade. He even hurled anti-Semitic remarks toward the arresting officer. The arrest report leaked. Headlines detonated globally within hours. The incident was reputational combustion. Gibson publicly apologized, calling his remarks despicable, and later entered an alcohol rehabilitation program. But the damage had already spread far beyond that stretch of highway. On July 29, 2006, the day after the arrest, he and Robin separated. Though neither publicly framed the DUI as the sole cause, the timing was unmistakable. After 26 years of marriage, the foundation had cracked at the exact moment his public image imploded. The separation simmered for nearly 3 years before becoming official. On April 13, 2009, Robin filed for divorce in Los Angeles County Superior Court, citing irreconcilable differences. There was no prenuptial agreement. Under California's community property laws, that meant assets accumulated during the marriage would be split equally. At the time, Gibson's estimated net worth hovered near $850 million, thanks largely to back-end profits from The Passion of the Christ, which grossed more than $600 million worldwide on a production budget of approximately $30 million. The settlement exceeded $400 million. This was one of the largest divorce settlements in Hollywood history. When the divorce was finalized on December 23, 2011, it closed a chapter that had once symbolized endurance and traditional values. The optics were stark. The devout family patriarch had lost both his marriage and half his fortune in the span of 5 years. Yet even as that marriage unraveled legally, Gibson had already stepped into a new relationship. In 2007, he met Russian pianist and singer-songwriter Oksana Grigorieva. By October 30, 2009, they welcomed a daughter, Lucia. On paper, it appeared to be a fresh start, a new partner, a new child, a second chance at domestic life. In reality, it would become one of the most turbulent episodes of his personal history. By April 2010, the relationship had collapsed. Grigorieva obtained a restraining order against Gibson, alleging domestic violence. In June and July of that year, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department investigated allegations tied to a January 2010 incident at Gibson's Malibu home. Then came the recordings, leaked audio tapes, in which Gibson was heard shouting obscenities and racial slurs during arguments with Grigorieva. The recordings were played repeatedly across television networks and online platforms, magnifying the public perception of volatility that had begun with the 2006 DUI arrest. The legal consequences followed. In March 2011, Gibson pleaded no contest to a misdemeanor charge of battery involving a former cohabitant. He was sentenced to 3 years of probation, 16 hours of community service, 1 year of domestic violence counseling, and fines. The custody battle over Lucia became a tabloid fixture. Grigorieva initially sought millions in a settlement, but the protracted dispute ended with her accepting approximately $750,000, joint legal custody, and a house in Sherman Oaks, California, designated as Lucia's residence until she turned 18. Each courtroom appearance, each leaked audio file, each legal motion deepened the impression that Gibson's off-screen life was spiraling in ways that mirrored the intensity of his on-screen characters. The same ferocity that made him compelling in battle scenes now seemed to surface in domestic disputes. Patterns were no longer subtle. A decades-long marriage ended in financial shockwaves. A rebound relationship escalated into restraining orders and criminal charges. Public apologies followed by further controversy. His artistic achievements, such as directing Apocalypto in 2006 and earning later acclaim for Hacksaw Ridge, often struggled to dominate headlines over personal turmoil. And yet, through every fracture, Gibson remained a figure who returned. To filmmaking, to interviews, to fatherhood, the patterns did not disappear. Mel's public persona and controversies. Born in 1956 in Peekskill, New York and raised in Australia, Mel Gibson became a breakout action star with the Mad Max films in the late 1970s. By the mid-1980s, he was a global name as Martin Riggs in the Lethal Weapon series, the wisecracking, unpredictable cop whose reckless bravado epitomized a new era of blockbuster cinema. Through the 1990s, Gibson's face was one of Hollywood's most recognizable. That public image of the wit-slashing action star and serious dramatic actor would soon be complicated by his ambitions behind the camera. In 1995, Gibson made a gamble that would define his legacy. He directed and starred in Braveheart, the sweeping epic about Scottish rebel William Wallace. The film was a cultural phenomenon and, by modern metrics, a blockbuster debut as a director. At the 68th Academy Awards, the film won Best Picture and earned Gibson Best Director. It was the apex of his public persona. However, parts of the critical establishment accused Braveheart of xenophobic sentiment, and some historians challenged its liberties with history, calling the film's portrayal of the English Anglophobic and culturally provocative. These critiques hinted that Gibson's public persona was more complicated than the simple hero archetype his roles often suggested. Gibson's boldest, and later most controversial, pivot as a filmmaker came in 2004 with The Passion of the Christ. He directed, co-wrote, produced, and funded much of the estimated $45 million project himself, creating a visceral depiction of the final hours of Jesus' life in Aramaic, Latin, and Hebrew. The film was a commercial titan, grossing over $611 million worldwide and becoming one of the highest-grossing R-rated films of all time. But it was also the flashpoint of a long-running confrontation with morality, religion, and cultural criticism. Long before Passion hit theaters, protest groups and religious leaders expressed concern that its imagery and narrative could revive centuries-old anti-Jewish tropes. Critics argued that by showing Jewish leaders as the architects of Jesus' suffering, the film echoed narratives that had historically fueled discrimination and violence. These criticisms were serious enough that major studios like 20th Century Fox initially declined to distribute the film in the US. Gibson's own staunch traditionalist Catholic worldview only made the controversy more combustible. The film's success was undeniable at box offices and with audiences, but for some in Hollywood and beyond, The Passion of the Christ was a harbinger of things to come, a work that would shape how the public interpreted Gibson's beliefs and personality. His defenders saw him as a fearless artist. His critics saw a man perilously close to endorsing the worst impulses of religious fervor and bias. Then, in July 2006, Gibson's life became its own unfiltered drama when he was arrested in Malibu, California, for driving under the influence of alcohol. According to the official report, he was stopped by a Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputy for speeding late on the Pacific Coast Highway, with an open container of alcohol in his car. Gibson's blood alcohol level registered 0.12%, above California's legal limit of 0.08%. In the early hours of that July morning, as deputies escorted him to the patrol car, Gibson unleashed a torrent of anti-Jewish statements at the arresting officer. The arrest report of the incident was leaked. Within hours, Gibson's words were viral headlines. The fallout was immediate and seismic. Jewish leaders expressed deep outrage. Publicists and crisis management experts said Gibson's remarks could irreparably damage his career. Analysts at the time told CBS News that Gibson's apology, issued days later, was too late to stem outrage, and that many people now saw him not just as a troubled star, but as anti-Semitic. Gibson eventually pleaded no contest to the DUI charges, was placed on probation, fined, and ordered to attend alcohol rehabilitation classes. He acknowledged he had struggled with alcoholism and publicly apologized for the anti-Jewish statements through his spokesman, calling them despicable remarks made while out of control. But the damage to his persona was profound. Interviews with American television, including a highly watched sit-down with Diane Sawyer, had Gibson described the tirade as just the stupid rambling of a drunkard. This crisis, built on earlier controversies from derogatory comments he allegedly made about gay people in a 1991 interview to ongoing debates about Passion's theology and meaning, helped transform how audiences and Hollywood insiders saw him. A star once admired for rugged individualism was now widely described as a figure who spoke before thinking, whose off-screen behavior overshadowed his on-screen accomplishments. In the months and years after 2006, Gibson worked to rehabilitate his image. He entered treatment for alcoholism and made efforts to explain his behavior and apologize directly to groups he had offended. He continued to make films, directing Apocalypto in late 2006, a widescreen thriller set during the decline of the Mayan civilization that drew mixed critical response. While some praised its intensity and craftsmanship, others could not separate the art from the controversies surrounding its creator. Despite the storm, Hollywood did not exile Gibson entirely. Some peers defended his talent while condemning his words. Others refused to work with him again. Over time, his career steadied, yet the shadow of those controversies lingered. The public persona he cultivated through decades of intense, visceral roles was, in many eyes, inverted by his own words and actions. Rather than being merely the charismatic rogue he often played, Gibson became a figure whose real life dramatized the very flaws and contradictions that make for tragic heroes. Now, he finds himself, once again, in the spotlight. And it's not the good kind. The Rosalind Ross chapter. Even for someone whose life has repeatedly played out like a Hollywood script, the decade Mel Gibson spent with Rosalind Ross had its own dramatic arc. Gibson and Ross first crossed paths around 2014, introduced by mutual friends when he was in his late 50s, and she was a California-born screenwriter, film director, and former equestrian vaulter in her early 20s. Ross, born July 5, 1990, in Aptos, California, was already forging her own artistic path, directing, writing, and executive producing the 2022 biographical drama Father Stu. Despite the nearly 34-year age gap between them, what started as companionship soon deepened into a long-term partnership. By January 2017, after roughly 2 years together, the couple welcomed their first and only child, Lars Gerard Gibson, born in Los Angeles as Gibson's 9th child. The joyful announcement came in the same breath as professional triumph for Gibson. Hacksaw Ridge had just earned him an Oscar nomination for Best Director. This seemed like a new chapter of stability in Gibson's life, but long before Larson's birth or Gibson's latest career achievements, the spotlight had already been trained on this relationship. In a world that obsessively quantifies celebrity relationships, the massive age difference drew immediate attention. Many commentators, media outlets, and social feeds buzzed about the optics of a 58-year-old Hollywood icon with a woman about his granddaughter's age. For observers who had followed Gibson's earlier life chapters, this romantic pairing became fodder for both criticism and fascination. Through the 2010s and early 2020s, the couple appeared relatively stable compared with Gibson's past. In public, at least. They were rarely photographed in paparazzi flurries, and Ross continued her own professional work behind the camera. The relationship endured, but as the years stretched on, outsiders often read between the lines. Was this simply the next inevitable tabloid chapter for Gibson, or something more enduring? Then came January 2025. In a devastating wave of Los Angeles wildfires, many parts of the Malibu area burned, including the hilltop mansion Gibson had owned since 2008, a sprawling estate on more than 5 acres. The blaze gutted memories, possessions, and the physical locus of family life that he and Ross had shared for more than a decade. Stories from the scene described ashes where wood-beamed ceilings and stone archways once stood, remnants of a home that symbolized more than shelter. While Gibson publicly lamented the loss of personal things and the feeling of home, the broader human toll, dozens dead, thousands of structures lost across Southern California, underscored the fragility of any material shelter in the face of nature's fury. Just months after that tragedy, and nearly a year after the fire, came another quiet pivot in this high-profile life story. On December the 30th, 2025, Gibson and Ross issued a joint statement to People magazine announcing they had separated in 2024 after 9 years together, but had chosen to make the news public only now. Although it's sad to end this chapter in our lives, they wrote, we are blessed with a beautiful son and will continue to be the best parents possible. The statement was calm, centered around co-parenting and mutual respect. The language was far more measured than much of the commentary that had surrounded Gibson in earlier controversies. In contrast to his 2006 DUI arrest and anti-Semitic outburst, or the bitter 2010 custody and restraining order battle with his ex, Oksana Grigorieva, this split was presented as peaceful and cooperative. It was a strategic move in a media landscape that has, at times, mercilessly dissected every scandal in his past. Behind the scenes, few details were ever leaked about why the relationship ended. Unlike the fiery breakdowns of previous relationships, this one appeared to have faded by mutual agreement. Back in 2016, during an interview with The Mirror, Gibson directly addressed criticism of the 34-year age gap between him and Ross. He said, "Regarding age and relationships, it's just a number," adding, "She is an adult, and we dig each other. We can rule out the age factor as the cause of the divorce." Then, in a 2017 interview with Entertainment Tonight around the time of Hacksaw Ridge and the birth of Lars, Gibson spoke warmly about fatherhood again in his 60s, calling it a chance to do it all over again, and expressing joy at welcoming his 9th child. Moreover, during a 2016 appearance on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, he joked about becoming a father again at 60, saying he had been home-changing diapers. He also gave a reflective interview to The Guardian in 2016 while promoting Hacksaw Ridge, where he discussed past mistakes, alcoholism, and the 2006 DUI incident. He acknowledged personal failures and spoke about learning from them. Though another chapter has closed for him, the choice of language in the statement, "We will continue to be the best parents possible," invites the public to see this less as a rupture and more as a transition, a different kind of partnership built around their child rather than romance. This amicable split is simply between two people who grew apart, but respect one another nonetheless. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.